Hello, everyone. This is Robert Clancy. I was sitting here in my den this morning holding this small, tarnished silver locket that's been in my top dresser drawer for longer than most of you have been alive. Inside is a grainy black and white photo of a girl named Martha taken back in 1958. Looking at her face, I realized that if I hadn't learned the lesson I'm about to tell you, I would have lost her long ago. Lost everything that makes my life worth remembering today. The passage of time is a funny thing. It creeps up on you until one day you're 80 years old, wondering where the decades went. Before I tell you this story, please subscribe. I want to pass this wisdom down before I'm gone, so you don't make the same mistakes I did. It started in 1960. That was the year we finally said I do. But the story really began in the hallway of our high school 3 years earlier. I can still hear the sound of her saddle shoes clicking on the linoleum. We were just kids, really. When we got married, I was 21 and she was 19. We didn't have a penny to our names. I remember our first apartment in a drafty building over a bakery. It smelled like yeast and old wood. Our dining table was a sturdy cardboard box covered with a yellow checked cloth Martha had sewn herself. Young people today might not understand this, but we didn't feel poor. We felt like we were starting a great adventure. But adventures have a way of getting messy. Let me tell you the truth. The first few years were a dream, but by 1968, the shine had started to wear off. We had 2 small children by then, and I was working 12-hour shifts at the plant. I'd come home exhausted, smelling of grease and cold air, and Martha would be there, equally exhausted, from chasing toddlers and stretching a grocery budget that never seemed to quite reach Friday. I remember one night in particular. It was a Tuesday. I can see the kitchen clock as clearly as if it were right in front of me. 11:15 p.m. I'd snapped at her because the house was a mess, and she looked at me with eyes so tired they looked bruised. She didn't yell. She just set down the dish towel and said, "Robert, I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't think you know who I am either." That was the hardest year of my life. We were living under the same roof, but we were miles apart. I started staying late at work just to avoid the silence at home. I thought about leaving. I really did. I convinced myself that we had just grown apart, which is a phrase I hear a lot these days. I thought maybe I'd married too young, that the girl I loved at 17 wasn't the woman I needed at 28. But then came the winter of '69. I came down with a bout of pneumonia that laid me flat for 3 weeks. I was weak, I was scared, and I was useless. And there she was. Martha didn't hold a grudge. She didn't bring up the fights or my coldness. She just sat by my bed, rubbing my chest with menthol and whispering that the kids were fine and that I just needed to breathe. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, seeing her asleep in the chair next to me, her hand still resting on the edge of the mattress. In all my 80 years, that was the moment I realized what marriage actually was. It wasn't the prom or the wedding cake or the excitement of that first apartment. It was that quiet, stubborn presence in the dark. It was the decision to stay when every instinct told you to run. I stayed. We stayed. We built a life through the '70s, through the recession that nearly took our house, through the loss of her father, and through the joy of seeing our children grow into people we actually liked. I promise you, there were times we didn't like each other very much. There were months where we were just teammates, not lovers, but we never stopped being partners. My late wife used to say that a good marriage is just 2 people who refuse to give up at the same time. Think about that. 2 people who simply refuse to quit. Experience has taught me that we live in a world that treats everything like it's disposable. If your phone breaks, you get a new one. If you're bored with a hobby, you find a different one. But a person, a soul, you can't just swap those out without losing a piece of yourself. You have to understand that love isn't a feeling you have, it's a decision you make every morning when you wake up. You look at that person snoring next to you or the person you're currently frustrated with, and you decide, I am going to love you today, even if I don't particularly like you right now. In my day, we didn't have apps to find someone new with a swipe of a finger. We had to fix what was broken. If the toaster broke, you took it apart and fixed the heating element. You didn't throw it in the trash. We treated our hearts the same way. Patience is a lost art. People want the happily ever after without the working through the middle. They want the 50th anniversary photos without the 5,000 nights of compromise that make those photos possible. Sacrifice isn't a dirty word. It's the highest form of love. It's putting down your ego and saying, I'm sorry, even when you think you're right. It's realizing that being right is nowhere near as important as being connected. Communication isn't just talking, it's listening to the things your partner isn't saying. It's noticing the way they sigh when they're stressed or the way they brighten up when you bring them a cup of coffee without being asked. If I could go back to that young Robert Clancy in 1960, I'd tell him to hold on tighter. I'd tell him that the hard years are the ones that actually build the foundation. You can't have a sturdy house without digging a deep hole in the dirt first. So, here is my wish for you. I hope you find someone who makes you want to be a better person, but more importantly, I hope you find the strength to stay when things get boring or difficult. I hope you realize that the person you're with is a treasure, even when they're covered in the dust of everyday life. Loyalty is a gift you give yourself as much as it is a gift to them. At the end of your life, you won't remember the arguments. You won't remember who was right about the budget. In 1984, you will remember the hand holding yours in the hospital room. You will remember the laughter over a burnt dinner. You will remember the peace of being known. Cherish them while they are here. Don't wait until you're holding an old silver locket to realize what you had. Thanks for listening to An Old Soul. Subscribe, share this with someone you love, and cherish them while they are here.